Welcome to the Garden Path Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 2. Today's guest is Lisa Valinsky, a writer based in New England who focuses on local food, farmers markets, and simple living. I began following Lisa's blog several years ago, and we connected based on our mutual interests, most recently in the fact that we became parents. I was interested in talking with Lisa for the podcast after seeing her get a plot at a local community garden this summer with her and her family, and was curious about her successes and failures with that venture. We talked about the garden plot, but also about her background working on small farms, managing farmers markets, and what the local food movement is doing good at, and what is lacking in her region of the country. If you enjoyed this episode or any of the episodes of the podcast, please consider leaving a rating and review on iTunes. This will help others find the podcast and gives me feedback on what you'll enjoy. You can also find me at Instagram at The Garden Path Podcast or by email at thegardenpathpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks and enjoy! Okay, looks like we're good. So, all right, thanks again for agreeing to come on and chat with me. So I guess we'll get started if you'll just introduce yourself and kind of give a little information about where you're from.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Lisa Valinsky, and I write at lisavalinsky.com. I write a blog about simple living and local food. I live in Connecticut with my husband, our young daughter, who's almost 1, and our dog, Maple.
All right. Yeah, I like, I've always been attracted to that area of the country for its local food movement. I feel like it's kind of that and the Pacific Northwest are probably the two main sources of local food. And so I'm always envious of you guys, especially in the summer when we're not growing so much because it's so hot. So I've definitely been interested, and I love all the photos you post on Instagram of the farmers markets you visit. So it's really
thanks.
fun to watch.
Yeah.
So I guess talk about that local food and farming. What are your beginnings into that, and how did you become interested in local food?
I would say it started in college. I was a vegetarian, trying some vegan food and really into cooking. And I decided the summer before my senior year to stay up at school. This was in upstate New York, and spend the summer. I got a waitressing job that was part-time, and I needed something else. And I was at the town's farmer's market, and there was a small sign at a little organic farm stand, and they said they needed help for the summer. And I approached them and got the position, and that pretty much jump-started my interest in local food. I spent 3 days a week on this farm. It was organic, but this was back in the year 2000, so the certified organic movement was just starting. And
yes.
Yeah, they practiced organically and grew all kinds of veggies and apples and berries, and they had chickens for eggs. And yeah, really, weeded, harvested, just got right into it and loved it. Just loved learning where food came from, and I learned about the politics behind a lot of it. And yeah, that's where it started.
Yeah, you mentioned the year 2000, and back when I was in college, I was in a little environmental group, and that was the first time I had heard about organic as well. And I definitely was interested in the environment up to that, but I didn't know anything about organic, about the food where it came from, factory farms, any of that until that group. And I remember trying to talk to people about organic food on campus, and they, it was definitely like, what? I mean, what do you mean? Is it okay to eat? Is it, it was hard to explain to people what it was, and even finding any organic food in the supermarket was so hard to find back then. And it's just amazing what, 16 years later, how it's changed so much.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I remember my college had, like, on the hot food bar stand, it wasn't local, but they'd have kale, and it was so sad looking. It would just be overcooked and wilted, and people didn't really eat it. And now kale's this big thing, and it's just funny to think back to that time.
Yeah. So it sounds like you had a lot of jobs on this particular farm, was there anything that you particularly loved? Like, what was your favorite part?
On this farm, I think working the farmers market. So this farm was a small organic farm, and yeah, I'd work a few days a week out in the fields, and then I'd try to work the farmers market in Saratoga Springs on Saturdays. But from there, a few years later, I got a job working with kids at another farm called Hawthorne Valley, and that's a certified organic and biodynamic farm, also in upstate New York, about an hour away. And I ended up working at this particular place on and off for many years, actually. Just kept going back.
It reeled you in and you loved it.
Yeah, really just,
So
yeah.
I guess when you were working at these farms, what um, catapulted you into learning more about the local farm and local food movement and interacting with your customers, and how did they help you want to know more and to see this thing through a little bit further?
Yeah, I think the main thing for me in all of it was the education piece and teaching people. Part of it is teaching people where their food comes from, but also teaching people about different foods. So, I grew up knowing about butternut squash, maybe acorn squash, but now I know about all kinds of squash. So just educating people that there's so many different foods we can try, and they all taste different. They'll, all kinds of heirloom tomatoes. That to me is really exciting. Just the variety and exposing ourselves to foods that aren't commonly found in the supermarket, but that are in time they are becoming more mainstream, I feel like. So yeah, I think the education piece.
Did you get a lot of people that were hesitant to try new things without knowing how to cook them? Were you able to tell them how to, maybe roast the vegetables or cook them up any particular way?
Yeah, it was something I had to learn too. So any of these jobs I've had where I've worked on farms, usually you get sent home with a bunch of food at the end of the day. And I learned through trial and error. So yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
roasting vegetables and steaming things, and that was nice too, was just feeling like I actually could explain to people what to do with them, and not just, when I was in college, I'd ask the farmer because I wasn't cooking so much. Um, and yeah, just being able to teach people what to do with this stuff so they'd actually go home and use it.
Yeah. I have you heard of kashaw squash before?
I haven't.
It's a big green and white striped gourd, and well, I call it a gourd. It's not really a gourd; it is a squash. But I remember seeing it for sale at in big garden centers, and I would decorate my house with it for in October and November. And I didn't realize it was edible until I saw it at a farmer's market. And
Oh,
the I was so cool because I saw it and I was like, oh, this is awesome. And he's like, oh, it is the best squash. You can roast it and you can put it in smoothies. You can do so much with it. And it was really good. And you could even make, your typical zucchini bread, that kind of thing, if you, slice it up. So I thought that was pretty cool to see something that, might be mainstream out there and that people probably really don't know the name of and how to even do anything with it, that it's even you can even actually cook with it. So that was probably
yeah.
one of the cool things for me, was being able to talk to someone at the farmer's market and they actually knew what to do with it.
Hmm.
And so I've tried to grow it and I haven't had any success, but
Oh,
the squash bugs like to get my plants. So
yeah, yeah.
So from those particular jobs, how have that translated to other jobs in your life and starting your blog? Because your blog is about local food and um, farming and simple living. How has that influenced you?
Yeah, I guess, well, My husband and I, soon after we met, well, after maybe a year together, we moved up to Vermont, and Vermont has a very big local food scene, one of the biggest I've seen as far as support for farmers and the local food businesses. And we moved up there really thinking we were going to live off the land and buy a little place and garden and homestead. And that's when I started my blog, was to write all of our stories from up there, from hiking stories to I learned how to sprout my own seeds in my kitchen, and we got a winter CSA share that I documented. That was really the start of my blog. And things turned when we got through a winter and it was incredibly cold and we were pretty far from family, and decided, this is a great place to visit, but I don't think we want to live here for the long haul. So we moved, and out of all places, we wound up in New York City, where we had friends and family and some connections, and had a sublet that we were able to live in for a while. And in New York City, I got a job working for Green Market, which is a big farmers market network, and there are over 55 farmers markets in the city run by this organization. And so even though I was in this enormous city, I was able to take a piece of kind of like nature and quiet and delve into it there too, and educate people. And I talked about that in my blog too, as we made this shift with our lifestyle. But I tried to keep things in my life as consistent as I could. And it was a really incredible opportunity.
And so you went from Vermont, where everybody's probably eating fairly local, to New York City, where, there is those niches of the local food movement, but there's also probably plenty of people eating, the standard American diet. Were you still kind of preaching to the choir, or were you actually able to reach out and talk to other people about organic food and growing your own food? Or was it a lot more difficult?
I think it was kind of a mix. There were a lot of people who already believed in the local food movement and supporting local farmers, but a big push in that job was reaching people who were on food stamps, actually, and showing them how they could use their food stamps to buy food at the market and find affordable food at the market, which isn't, not that it isn't easy, but you have to know what you're looking for. And teaching people how to cook, some of these squashes and things people might not be familiar with. So yeah, I would say it was a mix in New York City of kind of the diehard farmers market shoppers, and then people who were just passing through and happened to be walking down a block where there was a farmers market, and I might have a sample I was making of some kind of salad, and could teach people about Swiss chard or different kinds of things like that.
So, I mean, since you're talking about food stamps, how difficult is it for people to buy stuff at the farmers market on food stamps?
It depends on the market. This particular set of farmers markets, almost everyone, at the time, I think maybe 50 or 51 of them had these tokens people could buy at the farmers market, and they could exchange their food stamps for these tokens that the farmers would collect. And there were often extra incentives for people, like, buy $10 worth, get an extra $5 for free.
Okay.
Programs like that. So just to really try to get people to spend their dollars there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was a big piece of it. I don't know nationwide. I think it depends market to market. I go a lot to a market up in Springfield, Massachusetts, and I know they have a program that's similar, where people can go to the information stand at the farmers market and swipe their card and get tokens to use.
That's really cool. I need to check on mine. I don't know if that's even available here or not. It's a pretty small market, but it's been involved. It's been going for several years. So,
Hmm.
but that's interesting. I that's one aspect I think that gets fallen through the cracks is those who can't afford maybe to buying organic and um, not necessarily just organic, even just fresh fruits and vegetables that I think they skip out on at the grocery store just because they feel like, well, I might as well not do it if I can't buy it organic, or what am I going to do with, you know, this chard and some carrots? Is it going to
Right.
feed my whole family? So
Hmm.
that's good that they're actually trying to to make that available and user friendly, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, just a lot of elderly and all kind, different populations, and yeah, just trying to educate people and people who may not speak English as a first language, so things like that. Yeah,
It's
there's
more
some pretty big
inclusive, I
challenges.
guess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're a vegetarian. Have you been vegetarian your whole life?
Not my whole life. I became a vegetarian at the end of high school. And
Okay.
then I was actually vegan in college for a couple of years, and I'm a vegetarian now. So it's been a long time.
And how have you, I guess, developed your recipes over the years? Have you just started making things that you know you'll like and then kind of branching out from there?
I think, well, some of it started just based on budget, actually. So when I think back to just after college, I was cooking for myself. I had cooked a little bit in college, but not that much or that well. And I did a program. I don't know if you know of AmeriCorps.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I did a year of AmeriCorps, like a kind of community service program, and we got a living stipend that it was maybe $10 or $12,000, and I needed to buy groceries, so I would
Yeah.
just try to figure out what was cheap. And so I bought all kinds of grains. I would go, there was a really great food co-op. I was actually in Vermont at the time, and they had pretty good prices. Or I'd go to the regular grocery store and buy big bags of rice, and I'd get dried beans, and I'd try things like millet. And I don't know that I bought quinoa back then, if that was such a big thing, but just different kinds of grains I'd never heard of before. Kasha, like buckwheat,
Yeah.
things that were pretty affordable, and any kind of veggies that were reasonably priced. So lots of cabbage and greens and things. And I would just make these huge batches of stuff. So this was before internet was that big, and I'd like cook up a big batch of rice, and I'd cook up a batch of beans, and I'd top it with salsa and cheese and some veggies, and eat that for like 5 days at a time. So that's kind of how it started. And then from there, I got more into cooking and just would experiment a little bit more. So, but I feel like my cooking is very utilitarian in a way. Like I try to keep things really simple. I don't like really crazy recipes where I have to go out and buy all these ingredients I don't already have on hand. Like I want to just be able to make something out of the food I already have at home.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I have a few vegetarian cookbooks because I was vegetarian for about 3 years almost,
mhm.
and that was one of my complaints was these certain recipes would need just this one thing, and then you'd flip through and it wouldn't be used again very often, and definitely, I'd try to substitute something if I could or eliminate it if it was possible, but that was probably one of my frustrating things about some of the vegetarian cookbooks, but.
Yeah.
I was like you. I like simple. I'm a fan of rice and beans and
Hmm.
something on top. It's very easy. So
Yeah. One pot meals and yeah, easy. I love to cook, but I also don't want to make it my whole afternoon, I guess. So,
yes, I like the idea of everybody posting their Sunday prepping for the week, their meal planning, and that probably would work in different time of of my life, but right now it's not so great. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I like that idea too. So,
Yeah.
so you were became a new mom last year, and how has it been, I guess, incorporating, whole food living and simplicity and having a new one, little one at home and trying to and change all of that into your life?
Yeah, it's been a big year. I, yeah, I think about, I guess, kind of just making our daughter a part of the process as much as possible. And she's still really young, so that'll be easier over the next couple of years. But even yesterday, we went apple picking, and we just went to a local farm and went out and brought our daughter. And, she was reaching for apples, and my husband helped her pick one. And it's just a small thing, but, we got home and I made sure to give her that apple with her dinner. Just even like to start some of the, like,
The food association.
yeah, and, that we can like grow our own food or cook our food and how it gets from, seed to table. But yeah, to be honest, I did a lot of jarred baby food the first 2 months because I am doing the stay-at-home mom thing for right now, which has been great. But I couldn't, I tried making baby food and got really overwhelmed by it. And I just would go out and buy stuff unless I had things that I had already made that she would be able to eat. But once she was able to eat more solids that she could chew on, now, yeah, I'm really into just foods as much as possible. So, if we're having quinoa and beans and spinach, she's going to have that too. And it's just really fun to watch. And I'm just trying to think of ways to get her involved in cooking. Right now, that's basically just giving her pots and pans to play with. And,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's fun.
I think you're going to see for at least in the next year, especially, that it'll be definitely a lot more fun and exploratory. Definitely finding that with mine and he's not necessarily wanting to eat the things he picks, but he has fun going out to see the tomato or the peppers and carrying, like I picked an okra yesterday and he wanted to carry it. So that was fun. Now eating it's a different story.
Yeah.
He's in the toddler phase of being picky. So
right. Yeah. Right now I'm getting as many types of foods as I can in, because I'm sure that'll change over the next year or two.
Yeah, I'm definitely envious of the people I see where their toddlers and kids are eating eating the squash and the corn and these great things. I'm like, how do you do that? I've tried. So you also had a community garden plot this summer, and how did that go in the beginning versus what in the reality at the end?
Yeah. So it's now I can look back and laugh at it. I was pretty hard on myself at the time. So I did some research in the spring about community gardens. We live in an apartment and have a patio that doesn't get great sun. So at first I thought, we can just do some potted tomatoes and basil, keep it really easy. And then I found out our town has a community garden plot. And right before sending the check, I said to my husband, maybe we shouldn't do this. I don't know if this is a good idea. And he was like, no, let's just do it. Let's try it. We'll see what happens. And I had envisioned like our baby sitting like on a blanket in the garden and I'm busy weeding. Right. Idealist view. Yeah. So we get our plot. The summer we live in Connecticut and it's usually in the 80s in the summer, but it was in the 90s most of the summer here. And this plot is great. It's on a really beautiful historic farm, but it gets direct sunlight all day, which is great, but it's really hot. So even the first day we went to this nursery and we picked out transplants and seeds, and we get to our plot and it's swelteringly hot, and we have the baby with us, and it was just like mad rush. Like I was envisioning like, oh, well, like, you know, just get all the weeds out, you know, till it, whatever we need to do, and clear it first. And then we just stuck everything in the ground. It was like mad rush to plant the garden. So we planted everything in weeds. It just, yeah, I had high hopes. And within a week, the weeds just got out of control. It happened really quickly. And we were pretty into it the first month or two. We would go a couple times a week and go and garden, water it, and try to weed as much as possible. Go really early in the morning, like 6:30, before it got too hot. But it was just really hard to keep up with. So I had high hopes, but in the end, a bunch of stuff died. But we did get, you know, we got a lot of Swiss chard in the beginning. We were able to freeze tomato sauce that we made from our tomatoes. And we had good basil. Yeah. So in the end, we had some stuff come out of it, but it was pretty hard with a new baby and the heat of the summer. So I don't know how you do it in Texas. It must get really hot in the summer.
It does. It's pretty brutal. And sometimes I just like, why am I out here right now? Mm-hmm. But things have to get done. And I'm just like, if I want anything, it has to be worked. So, and yeah, definitely something I've had struggles with myself. Last summer, our garden was weeds. So there was a few things planted in the spring of 2015, but whatever was planted was what survived, and nothing else got planted or managed for the summer. So Don't feel bad. It's a hard thing, trying to have a baby and juggle that. And the people with multiple kids, I guess they've learned their lessons a few times that they know how to balance it all. But it's a challenge. So
yeah. And I know next summer we'll go back to the pots for, you know, some potted tomatoes and herbs, and keep it really simple, and just keep it in the backyard. That was the other hard part, was having to drive to the plot was
right.
Just an added challenge. Yeah. So
So you're going to do pots for next summer. Do you think you'll go back to a community garden in the future?
Maybe. I guess it depends on our living situation. And, you know, in the future, if we buy a house, which we'd like to do one day, we'd love to have even a small yard that we could just have a garden right in the back. That's the dream. So, and plant some apple trees and different types of berry bushes, you know, blueberries, blackberries, things like that. Yeah, that would be, get it kind of a little place set up. But yeah, in the next couple of years, either do something small in the backyard or possibly do a community garden again.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Yeah.
See, what I like about this is that you don't have to go all out to be a gardener, and that you can do little things and enjoy just what little bit you can do. And I think that makes people gardeners, whether they're planting just a rose or a tomato, or they've got, 10 acres.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about gardening. It's just so cool. So I just want to go right back into local food and farming and the farmers markets 1 second. Because I guess what really stuck with me was the access issue and being more inclusive. Do you see any other gaps in the local food movement, especially in your area, or niches that need to be filled, or you think it's pretty well rounded already?
That's a good question. I do think, it's interesting because in the summer, I like to buy local produce as much as I can, and anything local, honey, maple syrup, breads, things like that. But a lot of it's very pricey. And, I shop at the farmer's market, but if I can find, we have a really great farm stand that's a few minutes from us, and their prices are significantly lower than farmers markets. But other than driving past it, I wouldn't have found out about it any other way. And I guess just, I don't know, for people who want to access local food, and their prices are even better than the supermarket, and it's really
Oh, wow.
fresh, and yeah, they're really, really great stuff. Um, I guess one thing is communication or getting the word out to people who are
Hmm.
looking for cheaper food options and don't feel like, oh, well, I can't afford the stuff at the farmer's market, so I guess I can't afford local food or organic food, things like that. But also, we live in a really rural area, and I don't know if there are people who don't have cars or just aren't as mobile. We can get in our car and go drive up to the farmer's market, but for somebody who is doesn't have a car, um,
It's a
yeah, I would just
challenge.
think that, yeah, that's a challenge too. I know that's a big problem in a lot of cities, but we're not really, we're about half an hour from Hartford, Connecticut, and half an hour from Springfield, Massachusetts. And yeah, I imagine there are some food deserts there with just people not even able to get things besides food at the gas station or convenience
Right.
stores. So I know that's a common problem all over. But yeah, I think just prices is a big one. For me to go to the farmer's market and a bunch of kale is $3 or $4, and then a farm stand it's only $1.50. I'm going
Right.
to pick the farm stand, but yeah. So
Yeah, I think that's definitely my problem too. And I haven't been to my farmer's market lately, mostly because, we have the garden and
hmm,
I just haven't made the time to go there. But I definitely know that there can be three different people and all of them have different prices. So if you go to the one first off, you may pay $2 or $3 more for something than if you went a couple, stands down and found the kale for $1.50 versus three. Um,
hmm,
and I guess part of that also is, I'm always curious, like, okay, what really goes on at the farm and what are their practices? And you can only know that by be talking to these people constantly, or if you happen to be allowed to visit, I suppose, too.
yeah.
I think that's one thing I've also been skeptical about with, like, eggs, especially, is are you really free range or, this or that, or, um,
Oh, I know, right? I've wondered that too. Or are you not buying these at the supermarket and just selling
right.
them as local eggs? I don't know for sure. Yeah,
Yep.
that we talked a lot about that in New York City, just transparency and Green Market, who I had worked for, they do farm inspections, and they had a whole team of people who every couple of years would go visit farms to make sure that they were growing what they said they were growing and would check their invoices and seed records. And that gave customers a lot more confidence in what they were buying.
Right.
But that's not common, I don't think, and it's not the case everywhere. So, right, that's also why I like buying from some of the farm stands I found, is because I can drive down the driveway and see their big gardens in the back
Right.
and just
It's
have
a little
more
more,
faith that it's their stuff and that they're
right.
growing it, you know, maybe not organically, but it's probably not being, loaded down with chemicals to be shipped across the country.
Right, right. That is definitely a balance, trying to figure out like organic versus not, and
Yeah.
deciding, what's better, local or organic, and
It's hard, yeah, especially with a kid now too. I think about, I don't try to go crazy over everything, but I do like to keep in mind the dirty dozen with what I'm buying for
yes,
her. So, I'm going to buy organic potatoes and spinach and, especially things that we buy regularly, but
right,
it's not cheap. So, also keeping a list of things that are low in pesticides that we can buy frequently because we can't, we don't buy that much organic really.
right, yeah,
So, yeah.
yes, I totally understand. So, I guess we'll just wrap up if you can tell people where they can find you. You've been doing a whole lot of great blog posts in the last several months about simple living and farmers markets, and you have a great newsletter too that I really like that you put out. Can you tell people where to find find all of that and where to follow you?
Sure. Yeah, you can find me at lisavalinsky.com. It's V as in Victor, Alinsky. And I use that as my handle for all of my social media outlets. So Instagram's my favorite. I try to post every day on there. And I'm also active on Pinterest, Twitter, and Facebook. So yeah, and I have a little local food guide that shares a lot of like quick tips on how to cook local food and time savers. So I can share a link if you want for your show notes too, where listeners can get that guide for free.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely have enjoyed that. So thank you so much for coming on and talking about your experiences with the local food movement and your gardening. And I hope maybe in a couple of years when you get settled, we could talk again about establishing your garden and how that's going. So
thanks, Misty. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
thanks
cool.
for having
Thank
me.
you. No problem.